Hope everyone's doing well. So it's happy hour, right? Last one today. Awesome,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So hopefully this presentation will make you happy. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Cindy Czapla, and I am one of the career coaches at the Valparaiso campus. And besides being a career coach, I've also taught interpersonal communication for about 10 years now. So the reason I chose to talk about listening is because the employers are asking for skilled workers with listening skills. They want good communication skills. So what this means is if you're not working with customers, or even if you're not working with clientele, it is good that you retain good communication throughout the years that you are being employed, because this is an asset to you both inside and outside of the workplace. So I'm going to hone in on one of the most underused skills, of course, in communication. That skill is listening. All right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to be a better listener in the workplace and in your daily life. You can take these skills right into your home life. Okay. So what makes a good listener, right? Let's talk about the definition between listening and hearing. So many people believe that listening and hearing are the same thing. For example, in the job place and at home, if you hear things all day, you don't usually pay close attention to anything that you hear, because hearing is your body's response to noise. And you do this effortlessly and tune out sounds that are pretty routine to you. You respond to sounds that you don't normally hear, and you react according to them. However, listening is more than just reacting with sound. It's making meaning of what you hear and interpreting with responses based on what you interpret. It takes more effort to listen, and in order to be a good listener, you have to examine what type of listener you are and know where to improve your skills, right? So I love the graphic here. There's lots of steps to important listening, okay? So I'm going to start you out with a little test, all right? So this is, what is your listening style? Now I put this in a Google poll. You're welcome to click on it and answer the poll, or you're welcome to just, I'll scroll it. You're welcome to just look at the answers. But what I want you to do is make sure you take good notes of your score on each one of these. So you're going to rank them from 1 to 5. But there are 4 different types of listening skills. And that I'm going to give you this listening quiz. So it's 16 questions. You're going to rank them from 1 to 5, with 5 being the strongly agree, 4 being the agree, 3 being neutral, 2 being disagree, and 1 being strongly disagree. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes or so. I'll check the timer back in about 3 minutes. And let's take this and figure out what kind of listener you are. Let me put this in the chat for you.
I already did it.
Oh, you're so good. Thank
That's what I'm
you.
here for.
Okay. All right. We'll check back here in just a few minutes. Okay. If I can figure it out. I always have technical difficulties. Sorry about that.
It may be that you have to be logged into Google with your Ivy Tech.
Yes.
Email.
That's it.
Can't
That's
log
why I
in.
said, if you want to, let me go ahead and share my screen here, or get back to this one here. And this is the listening style. So if you can see that up on the screen there, I can read out the questions to you even too. When listening to others, it's important to understand the feelings of the speaker. Do you agree? Strongly disagree? Number 2, I listen to understand the emotion and mood of the speaker. Agree or disagree? Number 3, I listen primarily to build and maintain relationships with others. Agree, disagree? You're going to tally up your scores, so make sure if you put like 1 to 5, okay? I enjoy listening to others because it allows me to connect to them. Agree, disagree? I tend to withhold judgment about another's ideas until I've heard everything they have to say. Agree or disagree? When listening to others, I consider all sides of an issue before responding. I fully listen to what a person has to say before forming any opinions. Am I going too fast? For those of you who get logged in, I'm probably not. To be fair to others, I fully listen to what they have to say before making judgment. I get frustrated when people get off topic during a conversation. I prefer speakers who get quickly to the point. I find it difficult to listen to people who take too long to get their ideas across. When listening to others, I appreciate speakers who give brief, to the point presentations. You're not going to get that today. I often catch errors in other speakers' logic. I tend to naturally notice errors in what other speakers say. I have a talent for catching inconsistencies in what a speaker says. Sorry, ooh, I can't read today. And the last one here, when listening to others, I notice contradictions in what they say. Okay, so go ahead and let's tally up your scores, okay? So when we're talking about this quiz, I think you'll notice, of course, that the quiz is a little bit redundant with the questions, okay? So there's a reason for that, and it's to make sure that you understand exactly what is being asked of you and how you feel about the questions at hand. So, well, let's go over these so you can understand your listening type, and we will talk a little bit about each one and the pros and cons of each one so you can understand how they relate to the workplace. So add up your questions. So for questions 1 through 4, this was your relational listening score. The high score of that area is 20. Next, add up questions 5 through 8. This is your analytical listening score. Then add up your responses from 9 to 12. This is the task listening score. And then add up the responses from 13 to 16. And this is your critical listening score. So before I go over each of these sections, let's talk before we discuss them. Anyone want to share what they scored the highest in? Anyone?
Cindy, I was capturing all of that for the chat. 1 through 5 relational, 9 through 12 task, 13 through 16 critical. Could you fill me in on 6 through 8 real quick?
5 through 8 is analytical.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to talk about or share theirs? I'm not seeing the chat, so I'm not knowing if someone's in the chat or not.
Don't have any comments in the chat yet.
Okay.
I'll share my relational was 20.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So we'll learn a little bit about that as we see on the next slide. All right, so I'll go ahead and start talking about that. So relational listening, this is the first one on here. So this is the type of person that most people love to talk to because they're able to build relationships with people and they are easily approachable. So in the workplace, relational listening, with a good relational listener, you're the type of person that has first contact with the customer, or they work in a position where interaction and connections are very important. So if you are this type of listener, you're considered to be non-judgmental and supportive to others, and you're more likely to be responded to as people enjoy communication with you. So when you think of that, think of a workplace where you walk in and someone starts talking to you and puts you at ease. And that, my friends, is a relational listener. Someone who has a problem, this person is going to make sure that they're understood and that they have a solution for that by building a relationship through good communication. There is a downside to being a good relational listener, and that is you are easily buffaloed, okay? Sometimes you're trying to build a relationship. It's hard to be objective and see the conversation for what it really is. So in other words, in certain situations, relational listeners can be considered to be naive, okay? So you believe what people tell you because you like people. All right, any questions on that?
Nope, we did have Cynthia shared a score of 14, 11, 14, and 14.
Okay, so you're right in the middle with all those. So you like relational listening, and then you're good with analytical and critical as well. That's pretty interesting. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Okay, the next one here is the task-oriented listener, okay? So they're usually with task-oriented, you don't play around. You're taking care of business here, okay? So you're listening in great detail to the needs of a task in the workplace, and that is your focus. Now, employers often enjoy people who pay close attention to details and move forward accordingly. But the downside is that you are so focused on the task at hand that it's hard, you don't really consider any alternatives. So you don't feel no other need to have any more conversation about completing the task. So this would be someone in the workplace that does as they are told and does it the way that they want it done. Although this can be a good thing, you have to consider the customers at hand or the coworkers at hand and their needs, as well as any accommodations involved or meetings that have to happen, as well as any changes to the task that may have to be made. In other words, focus on the task, but be willing to involve others' ideas and considerations when you're completing the task if you scored high in task-oriented listening. Okay, the next one we have here is critical listening. Now this one's a little bit hard to deal with sometimes, but a critical listener will listen to every detail that's being presented and look for flaws to determine accuracy. So if you scored high on being a critical listener, you would be good at investigative work, which is good, right? In the workplace, this could be someone working in loss recovery or law enforcement or even human resources or even negotiation. They look for consistency in messages and they notice when things are not consistent. So this is a good listening skill to have, but it becomes frustrating when every minor detail of the conversation is being analyzed. And many people get frustrated when having a conversation with someone who's a critical listener, because it almost seems one-sided, but the listener is only trying to understand facts and analyze what they have heard so they can respond appropriately. These people can really pick up on when people are not being honest, okay? And that's because they're kind of picking apart a lot of the conversation that you have with them. So if you are a critical listener, you're scored high at that, you would be good at problem solving, but you're very consistent too. But you look, it's a good thing to listen critically and look for minor detail flaws, but just make sure that you still have meaningful conversations. So when you're listening to people, just don't say, you're lying, okay? All right, the last one here is the analytical listener. So this is kind of a holistic type of listener, if you want to say. They will listen to the entire message and analyze every angle of a conversation with a variety of perspectives. So they see the big picture of an issue. They have no problem analyzing every angle of something before they give a response. So they're good at dealing with complex issues at companies, but the downside to analytical listening is that it can be time consuming, especially when you need answers for something and you need it right away. Do not pick your analytical listener, okay? If you scored high on this one, you're going to be great at gathering perspectives, but you might get in too deep and you won't be quick with the answers. Now, some companies like that when they really have to dig into a problem. That is a good skill to have when you're listening to something and you kind of know, okay, this is what we need to do. All right. So talking a little bit further, okay, and I was going to put you in breakout rooms, but I'm not going to do that to you today. We'll work on something. I'm just going to have you kind of chat it out because I'm a communication person, so I kind of want to hear you talk or unmute yourself, talk in the chat, whatever you want. Someone will read the chat to me, right? So let's talk about this. What are the 6 most important skills, communication skills, I'm sorry, that you think you should have at a place of employment. So just jot down 6 of them that you think are very, very important, so you can enter in the chat or just unmute your mic. Let's discuss it. What do you think? Nobody wants to talk.
Crickets.
Crickets. Okay.
Can we give them Cindy, could we give them an idea of maybe one that might?
Let's say, well, what we're talking about now. What about work and listening? So what are some skills that go along? Like you think about, you communicate at work. What are some means of having a good communication skill at work? What do you think employees really look at, or employers really look at when somebody's sitting at their desk and they're talking on the phone or they're typing an email? What do they consider good skills?
Ooh.
I want someone who's going to repeat
out there.
Clarification. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, like, one job that I had, it was at a hospital. So they wanted you to be able to speak in terms of the job you're doing and at the level that you were doing, but yet be flexible enough to talk to other people. Like I worked with the vice president of finance and the president of finance. So they wanted me to be able to speak on that level, but yet when I was talking to one of the other departments who dealt more with just the common, person of the hospital, they didn't want me to have that highfalutin tone with them. So just have the right tone for the right area, I guess you could say.
Very good. Very good. And you're spot on with that. Anyone else? 6 skills. I think you named about 4 of them right there in your saying.
Right.
Okay. Well, we'll move on with that. So let's talk a little bit about, I've ranked them and they have been ranked in the textbook that I was using in my communication book. So these are the top 6. Okay. Of course, for the first one here, using the example from the hospital, listening and speaking. Okay. So this is, of course, number 1 skill, why we have this happy hour. Okay. You have to have the listening and speaking skill that employers want, and you have to be able to articulate yourself with integrity, enthusiasm, and be able to follow commands as well as give commands and speak effectively. So, that speech class that nobody really likes to take sometimes, okay, that's going to come in handy in your job, believe me. All right. So you'd want to make sure that you have the ability to speak well to people and communicate even in your written communication. So you're talking your emails, phone calls, verbal communication, anything like that. So the one thing I want to point out too is that listening and speaking is a good skill to have when you're doing an interview. Okay. The first thing that a job employer is going to ask is, why did you apply for this job? And you use your elevator pitch to prove that you have that ability for listening and speaking. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have that up front. The second one there, nonverbal communication. So this is big. All right. Over 65% of your daily communication is nonverbal, and it's more believable. So when somebody sees you, if you have this look on your face and you're like, have a nice day, or you're like, have a nice day. What does my nonverbal communication say right there? So the inflection of your voice, the way you use it, your body language, everything like that has everything to do with nonverbal communication. So they want people with good nonverbal communication skills, okay? You want to make sure that you keep that outward message that people see that you're not seeing. That is exactly what they want, is somebody who is very good at doing the nonverbal stuff very well. The third one there is enthusiastic communication and creativity, okay? So you have all these skills kind of run into one another. Communicating with enthusiasm is always welcome in the workplace. When employers ask for your input on a project or a situation, they want you to give feedback and ideas that show that you've listened to what was being said and you have responded in a way that shows that you're interested, and you can give feedback. Let's say you're in a work meeting, there's a new policy being implemented, you don't really agree with it, okay? Of course, you want to communicate with enthusiasm, whether you agree with this or not, right? But also, do you want to add some creative solution? Do you want to, get with your teammates and figure out a good way to communicate what you think the solution to a problem would be, okay? You don't have to go out to a meeting and get overly vocal about anything, but do have a little bit of enthusiasm in, you know, your speaking and stuff at work, and give your employer some creative solutions when and where you can. So I've seen some of the presentations over the last few days, and positive mindset was a big thing that was being brought out. So employers really do want you to kind of walk into work and have a bit of a positive mindset, and, you know, keep the communication where it needs to be, and don't, you know, try to have a positive attitude as much as possible. We all know that not every day goes well, but that's really what employers want, is just something to kind of keep you going, keep the team happy, keep moving on, right? The third one down there on the bottom is intergroup communication. So exactly like the example with the hospital, you were able to communicate with a variety of people in a various settings, okay? You can relate to other cultures, you can be respectful of other people, and that's intergroup communication. So there's a trend you can see with my presentation and some of the other ones that you've seen. There's more call for people who are able to communicate well and have a good tolerance for other people. So you work well with the team, you might have a different view, but your intergroup communication and, you know, speaking mindfully to those you work with is definitely a skill that is needed in the workplace. All right, number 2 here is mediated communication. So this is definitely the different types of communication, not just verbal, but we're talking emails, telephone calls. They want, you know, think Teams. We're always on Teams here at Ivy Tech. So, you know, we're kind of chatting back and forth. This is what people want, and the ability to engage and learn online. So something that you have to be comfortable with the workplace. Of course, the pandemic has really brought this to light. So we have to learn our mediated communication. Of course, the number one skill, I'm so happy about this, is interpersonal communication. I know that other people have brought this up too. You have to take all of these together. You have to learn how it is to manage conflict in the workplace, engage in small talk, manage everything here. And they really want these communication skills, but number one is interpersonal communication. If you haven't taken that class yet, it's a great class. Not promoting it just because I teach it, but it is a great class, okay? So let's talk more about being a good listener, because this is really what you came for, right? So in order to understand what a good listener is, you have to start with the back a little bit and go to the myths about communication. So everyone has these myths about what makes a good, you know, what makes a good listener and everything else. So we talked about this before. Number 1, hearing is the same as listening. No, and absolutely no. So listening is not it's something that you don't do automatically. It takes time and effort, okay? And we have a little YouTube video here. Let me get this up for you just to kind of show you exactly what we're talking about with that. 1 second here. All right, now that I know where the sound thing is, this is the funny clip about, you know, the difference between hearing and listening, all right? So think about this guy's place here, if you can hear him.
Are you sharing?
Yes, is it coming up?
I'm not.
Oh, no. This seems to be an issue with me. Hold on 1 second here. All right, can we see this?
Now we can see the image.
Thank you.
Oh, this commercial.
All right, ready.
Oh,
I'm so sorry about that.
Okay.
You'll be my son-in-law in a few weeks.
Okay, Jim.
Actually, I hope you can think of me as a buddy.
Sounds good, Jim. Jimbo. Jimmy boy, the Jimster. Jim? I mean, Mr. McDermott? Sir?
Switch to the network with the fewest dropped calls.
I
Plus,
love
$10
that commercial. I really do, for just learning about listening. Okay, so you hear what's going on the other end. You really don't know when you're trying to listen to what people hear. If something happens like that, you're not getting the same message. Okay, so that kind of goes along with the myth part here. Can you see the PowerPoint? Can you see the PowerPoint?
Sorry.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Number two, listening is natural and effortless. No, 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 no. So you always have room for improvement with that. So there's two important things to remember at your place of employment. And that is you
Cindy,
listen to people based on your experience and you listen based on instructions. So you listen to learn and you listen to teach. There are two most common interactions that you have with your coworkers, so make sure you're paying very close attention to what is being said. You're either learning or teaching. Most of the time, that is exactly what you do. There is always room for improvement with listening. People think they're great listeners and then they realize, oh, maybe I'm not, because I'm not hearing anything. If you have distraction around you, like if any of you are sitting there looking at your cell phones right now, that is definitely a distraction. So you're not going to be listening at all. And number three, which goes into the same thing, all listeners hear the same message. No, you don't. Your perceptions are going to change. Every message that you hear, these are based on what you know. So you're talking about your biases, gender, culture, someone who is a skilled listener. Everybody has a little bit of difficulty with this. We live in a world where there is so much going on around us at all times that it's hard to take that and focus it into one part of listening. It is much easier in the work environment if you were able to put all your effort to it, but think about it. You have got phones ringing, you've got coworkers talking, you've got teams bouncing back and forth, emails coming in. So no, you're not going to get the same message all the time, okay? It depends too on how you're feeling and what you're thinking at the time you get the message. Up here on the little clip here, it says, hey to you, this is Charles, this is Jared. Jared who? Charles who? Wrong person. Okay, so, we're not hearing the same message. I thought I was going to have a nice conversation, right? All right, so let's talk about responses for listening. Okay, so we're talking about the Hurrier model, and these are effective listening skills that you need to have. So there are 6 stages of effective listening. They are hearing, remembering, interpreting, evaluating, and responding. So let's talk a little bit about each of these here. And we'll go first into hearing. So remember, the hearing part is just learning about this hearing sound. Oh my gosh, here I'm floundering. All right, so the first stage of effective listening, this is our first interaction with someone in a conversation. You hear them speak. You also take into consideration that you will hear someone also be determined by what mood you are when you hear it. So going back to what I talked about before, if someone says, have a nice day, and you're not in that mood, that might change the whole meaning of your conversation, even with the nonverbal communication. So you are hearing something. You're not listening, you're hearing, and you're trying to make meaning of it. So that's the first stage of the effective listening process. The second stage is understanding. So remember Hurrier, we talked about that. So you comprehend words and phrases, but keep in mind in the workplace, it's okay to ask questions as well if you don't understand something. So this is a very important part of the listening process. Make sure you're listening, not hearing. You want to make meaning and ask questions. A good workplace will let you ask questions, even if they're redundant, okay? You want to make sure that you understand before you deliver a response to someone. So some interesting facts about remembering, which is the next step, is that we only recall about 25% of what we hear, and only 5% of that is totally accurate word for word. So in other words, you really have to pay close attention to remember specific details of a conversation. Our mind is constantly distracted. So we always have to make sure that we have our attention focused on the speaker. And in the workplace, it's important to make sure that you have notes. I am a note taker, okay? I love notes. I use OneNote all the time. Believe me, it's fine to write things down, to type things out, to remember. If you don't think you're going to remember anything, I used to blame my forgetfulness on age, but now I know that I need to work on this remembering part. So use triggers. Don't forget. Good process for effective listening. All right. Interpreting has a lot to do with you, okay? So there are 2 parts to the process, and that is taking in the verbal and nonverbal cues and signaling that you understand to the speaker. And if you're an effective listener and speaker, you're considering the response. So in the workplace, you should always consider what's said and not said, and make sure that you pay close attention so the messages are not misconstrued when you formulate a response. You want to make sure your response is clear and effective and gives indication that you were indeed listening to what's being said, which brings me to the last slide, and that is evaluating, not the last one, sorry. You're basically taking in everything, evaluating. So when somebody says something to you, you want to make sure that you understand the whole context of the message. You're judging the speaker's statements. You're considering the response. And in the workplace, what you use is you always want to make sure that you know what's said and what's not said, and make sure you pay close attention so that messages are not misconstrued when you formulate that response. You want to make sure that your response is clear and effective and gives indication that you were indeed listening to what was being said. This is the last slide, responding, sorry. So this is where you have to be very careful, okay? You're taking all these in, the Hurrier model, you're going through this obviously very quickly. You hear something, you have to respond. Your mind will go through these steps quickly, okay? So be careful of the response that you send. So someone says something to you, either like or don't like, you listen carefully, you didn't listen carefully, and then the real moment of truth comes. How are you going to respond? Okay. So you only need to remember that there are just magnificent seven types of responses. I doubt anybody has seen this movie. Okay, this is an old cowboy movie called The Magnificent Seven. I pulled this up and I thought, oh, perfect. So, and actually, when you look at the words, they look like they might actually be participating in this type of response, okay? So there are stonewalling, back-channeling, paraphrasing, emphasizing, supporting, analyzing, and advising. So when somebody says something to you in the workplace, what are you going to answer with? Hopefully not always stonewalling, okay? So which ones would you say are most appropriate work? Let's talk about these, okay? We can see by the Magnificent Seven picture what stonewalling is, and it's literally lack of facial expression or lack of participation in the chat box, right? Okay, you have no interest. That's what you're looking like, okay? When you back channel, you're just, okay, yep, oh, yeah, great, I get it. Paraphrasing is the most important part of this at work. Understanding and giving feedback on what is being said. When you have a presentation and they're presenting like a whole new program or something like that, that's where you want to paraphrase. If there's something that you're afraid to ask, I can guarantee someone in that audience who's listening to the presentation is thinking the same exact thing and they want to ask that question. I'm one of the firm believers that I don't think any question is dumb. I mean, everybody has to know what to say and how to understand, and paraphrasing is one good way to pull that all in and lend that understanding to people. So empathizing is hard, all right? This is one of the hardest listening skills that people have, okay? So it is very hard to say, I know how you feel, and indicate it. We're biased naturally as people. So we automatically, we want to understand, but we don't understand. Empathetic listening is very, very difficult to obtain. And that's why listening isn't such an easy skill. I mean, people say they're a good listener, but really taking it all in and being empathizing when you're given a response is a difficult task sometimes, unless you're a good listener, right? Supporting, of course, you're giving somebody's point of view and analyzing. We already talked about that. So just and that's more on the perspective part, and advising. So based on all of these, kind of breezing through them, but the most important thing to remember when you're responding to something that somebody has said at work is which one are you going to pick? Based on your situation, all 7 of these are appropriate responses when you're listening to somebody. You have to be careful which one you choose. Okay, don't always pick stonewalling, although it's easy, just stare at somebody like, what planet did you come from? But that is the best thing to remember, is that you have to remember the situation at hand and what the response should be. I always tell my students, when you get an email from somebody and you do not like this email, especially in the office, give yourself the 24-hour rule. Okay, unless you have to respond right away, then give yourself a good hour. That email's not going to go away, and your feelings will dissipate, and you are only hearing a one-sided conversation. So you have to just make sure that you kind of cool yourself before you go back in and answer an email that you maybe not like. Okay, but these are all like verbalization things. Questions so far? Chirp, chirp.
We did have one question.
Okay.
It's from Jessica. So
Okay.
what if you do all the right things and you respond to ask for clarity, but they don't answer? So we know about not stonewalling others, but what if they're stonewalling us?
That is an
Thank you,
absolute
Erin.
wonderful question. Okay. Go above them. That's what I always say. If you can't get the answer from someone and they are not answering you back, especially in the workplace, do investigative, find out from somebody else and somebody who has the authority to tell you what is going on. Okay. A lot of people do stonewalling because they don't want to give you the answer, or they're afraid that the answer is not going to make you happy. So they're going to stonewall a little bit and hope that you go away. Okay. That's not a good response. But I have taught, like I said, I've taught this class for 10 years, and I've had people ask me various questions like that. Find out from somebody who can give you that information. There's always more than one. If there's not more than one, there's got to be a manual. There's got to be something. Okay. So good point on there, Jessica. Did that answer your question?
Certainly. The issue is that it's coming from a supervisor. So
Oh no. There's always somebody above them.
I know, but then
Always
you run the
somebody
risk.
above them.
You
That's
run the
not
risk of
networking.
getting in trouble because you went above your
Yeah.
supervisor. So
You
there's
don't want to get in trouble for going above. Network a little bit, or just wait. Wait and then ask again. I always say, what's the appropriate time? Usually if they don't answer you within 3 days, you can go back and address it again and say, hey, I sent you this email 3 days ago. I just want to make sure you got it. Can we discuss it face to face? And that's probably a better way to do it, honestly. Can I set up a meeting? Can we have time together to talk about this? That is the best way to answer something like that. If they're stonewalling or just not answering you or looking at you like you're, what? I don't want to answer this. Walking away from a conversation. That's the hardest part about it, okay?
Yeah.
Some people are not good with responses, in the workplace, and that makes a huge difference. So I think you can agree that is a problem, definitely. Get back to me on this one. I hope it's not happening to anybody, but I would love to see what the response that you get. I always say face-to-face conversations better, as I'm staring at the camera light on my Zoom thing, but
Right.
it is
That's the
always
problem. We've
It is
been
always
doing
better.
this for a year
year.
now,
Yeah.
and it's hard. It's like at this point with Zoom or with working virtually,
yes.
we're talking about picking our battles. Like this is not the hill I'm going to die on. So I'm just going to let her stonewall me. Okay.
You have a good point. Pick your battles with that. That is an excellent point there. If it's that urgent, it will again come up,
Some other comments. Sharonda asked to recap, what are the 4 types of communication? Relational, analytical.
Relational, analytical. Hold on, I'm flipping back on do you want to go back on the slide too? Yes, no, maybe.
I'm actually sharing your slide deck.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Because I can't see anything except the slide in front of me. I appreciate that. So relational, analytical, critical, empathic. No, wait, analytical, critical.
Task-oriented. There we go.
Okay. Well, it's happy hour. I got to mess up something, right? Okay.
I know. And it's St. Patty's Day, so you better be
It
drinking
is St.
Guinness.
Patty's Day. I've got my green on too. So, all right. Let's talk. Any more questions before I move on?
Some other just comment. As I scroll to the right place, because now messages came in and I'm lost. Okay. Be careful about saving venting draft emails to your work email. Employers might read the draft. Laura said, I write drafts in Notepad, not an email program. Don't want to
Perfect.
accidentally send it. D says paraphrasing is important, especially in such a busy world.
Yes.
But this is why I also said what I did, because people are dealing with so much and so stressed. Sometimes they're not acting as they normally would.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's empathy right there.
Yes, that is absolutely. This is, this is going to be hard to do when you're doing this like we are. Let's all face it, okay? We've been in Zoom meetings where we're falling asleep. All right, you're not listening, okay? We live in this digital world right now where it makes it really hard to listen and have good responses. Even in the workplace, these are skills you'll take with you, but yeah, right now they're almost like you use them, but they're almost on hiatus. It's hard sometimes to have these listening skills when you've got a digital thing going on. We all know this. Just have to try to focus. That's all I can say. And it's hard. You get screen addicted and things like that. Believe me, I know when I shut this thing down, I'm done for the day. I don't even want to look at another computer. I don't want to look at my cell phone. I'm just done. So as hard as it is, paraphrase, responding, empathetic listening, even over a computer, hard to do, but at least we're getting some skill set out there for it. So eventually we're going to go back to work, right? I hope. Anyway, any other
Speak for
questions?
yourself.
There was recommendation to, if you're going to write a venting email, to do it in Word. Again, that's
Yes.
a good idea. I do this, like, if I have to do something like that, it is not going in an email draft, because what if I
Mhm.
accidentally hit the wrong button?
Yeah.
Paraphrasing also helps to ensure you heard correctly. Exactly. Tying back into I'm talking so much and I don't have my camera on.
It's okay.
Tying back into the presentation from yesterday about employability skills and that activity
Yes.
we did, being able
did
to
listen.
repeat back. Laura said, if they're stonewalling, one thing you can do is rephrase it as a statement and then act as if you are interpreting their silence as an agreement with the statement. That will usually make them clarify. That could be a way to handle it. You do want to be careful about any implication that silence is the agreement.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Verbal communication is always better. Face-to-face communication is always better. Emails are not, they can be retrieved. No matter where you're at, they can be retrieved. That's one thing I teach in my classes. If you have something important to say to somebody, it is better to do this face-to-face. Although this isn't face-to-face, this is in front of my computer, but it is better to sit down and talk to somebody face-to-face and work out the differences or whatever communication that you need to get out, rather than to send something that could be misconstrued later, okay? I like to send emails and recap what we talked about. That's my biggest thing. Okay, so here's what we did. Here's what we said. Have a nice day. There you go. And that's after you verbalized everything. Makes sense?
And then Sharonda said that quiz, I did not get all of the different communication.
We figured that out.
Yeah. Oh, you want the four. Okay, hold on one second. They are analytical, task-oriented, critical, and I'm
Analyze.
forgetting.
Right.
Thank you.
Uh,
That's okay. I need to go home now, seriously. All right. So I really do. No, wait, I'm home. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
Analytical, relational, task-oriented, critical. Analytical, relational, task-oriented, critical. I wish
Yeah,
there
I
was an
can think of
acronym for that. So if someone thinks of a good one, let me know. Anything else? How am I on time, Aaron? Am I good?
The one last time I got analytical, relational, task oriented. What's the fourth? I'm sorry. Oh,
Critical.
right there, critical.
Yeah. And we'll send out this PDF of the slide decks to all the students
Yes.
after I get everything wrapped up for career camp. So
Awesome.
no worries, we got your back.
Great. If you have taken if you have taken interpersonal communication, COM 102 at Ivy Tech, this is chapter 7. Okay. All this
Voice.
stuff's in chapter 7 of all the textbooks. Since I've taught it for 10 years, I have 4 of them. So, okay.
Woo.
Anything else before I move on to the end here?
I think we're good.
Okay. Let's move on to the types of listening. Now, I just pulled these up because these are the 3 that you will more than likely use in your workplace, okay? The first one, of course, is the informational one. So job training, professional development, anything of the sort there, that is what you want to use. You will use critical listening skills as well because you're going to be making decisions. So you have to be able to, even though it's hard to talk to a critical listener, you do have to make sure that you have the skills so that when you're problem solving, which is a very strong skill to have. And then the last one is, I said, empathic is the hardest skill to have because you can't put yourself in someone's mindset or their place if you don't understand the experience. So just make sure that you know it is good to have empathic listening and be an empathetic person, but it is very challenging sometimes. Sometimes we don't always feel like identifying with someone, especially if they've made us upset about something. You have a natural tendency to just kind of push that person away and not listen to what they said. It is better to try to engage as much as you can in empathic listening. Okay, there's always room for improvement with that. All right, so what's stopping you from being a good listener? All of these. You have noise everywhere in your workplace. You have it. You pretend you're listening. We talked about, Zoom meetings, and all joking aside, some are not as interesting as others. So you are pseudo listening on a lot of those, and selective attention. So what that means is that if somebody says something that you don't agree with, or you have a bias towards, or this is not in your belief system, you will cut it out and you will not listen to that. And there is also with students, information overload. I may have done this to you today, and I do apologize, but what this means is that you are getting so much in that it's hard to process. I tell my students all the time, when you're studying, and especially when you're studying for finals, and for any nursing students out there, when you're studying for your anatomy final, you can get overloaded and you have to stop and you have to take breaks. And that's very important. Glazing over is another thing. You're just kind of like, there's so much going on. You're like, wait a minute, what, where am I going? Okay, yeah, nodding my head. The last 3 are very detrimental, okay, for listening. Rebuttal tendency, and these are people who interrupt. They already have the response formulated in their head before it's done. Okay, so you don't want to engage in that behavior if you can't. Just wait for someone to finish speaking, even if you're not listening well to them. Closed-mindedness, I don't think I have to explain this. That does affect your listening. You will tune things out, and that kind of goes along with selective attention, as well as competitive interrupting, not letting somebody finish what they have to say before you're in there giving another idea. These right here are the things that stop you from being a good listener and paying attention, okay? So the things that you can do in the workplace, separate the facts from the fiction, okay? Paraphrasing, we talked about this, paraphrasing. You have to make sure that people understand you when you respond. Try to avoid confirmation biases. And these are things that we all naturally have, okay? To be a good listener, you kind of have to get past that and take in what other people say, which goes right with the next one. You're acknowledging others' feelings and using empathy, okay? And you notice I said empathy about 9 million times in this presentation. That's because it is very important. We naturally have a tendency, of course, in the workplace, you want to keep it professional, of course, but use the empathy where it is appropriate, okay? So do I have time to do about 7-minute TED Talk, or should I just put the link up?
I mean, it's up to the group if you want to watch the video. We do have time. Since you are the last session, we can.
If not, I'll put the YouTube link up and you can watch it yourself if you want.